Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tachyon Transmissions. And this is the podcast where we discuss all things Star Trek and science fiction. And you are currently joining us on our journey through Season 3 of Strange New Worlds. And hopefully you're on this episode because you just listened to our episode on Episode 1, Hegemony Part 2. So we are going to be tackling now Episode 2, which is Wedding Bell Blues of Season 3. And this was a very interesting episode. It kind of continues the trend of Strange New Worlds of having clashing tones, clashing genres. And I know a lot of people had some issues with that when the show was first starting, but I honestly have come to realize that it's kind of the greatest strength of the show is that it's able to tackle different themes and different tones and genres with its characters and juggling their development and the storylines really well. And so, we jump right into that because Episode 1, Hegemony Part 2 was very much a action thriller with some elements of horror, body horror in there. And now, Jordan, we're jumping into what could kind of be described as a comedy episode. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
So we're absolutely jumping right into that. Jordan, why don't you give us a quick breakdown of like what this episode is, and then we can kind of start breaking it down.
Sure. So we open up. It's been 3 months since the end of Hegemony Part 2. The Enterprise was beaten and battered, so she's gone through her repairs. Crew's got some rest, some shore leave. Captain Batel has been undergoing her recovery on the Enterprise, and we meet a new male nurse in sickbay who's taken over Christine Chapel's spot temporarily, who looks to be staying on. It'll be interesting to see where that character goes. It is the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Federation Charter, so it's 2161. I believe it was the last episode of Enterprise, the infamous holodeck scene, that charter where Captain Archer gives the speech. It's the 100th anniversary of that. Christine's coming back, and Spock has been taking dancing lessons from La'an. They've grown very close. Byron and I both noticed that Spock and La'an have become very close. But Christine, Uhura lets Spock know that Christine has returned, and being mixed signals, Spock has, bless his heart, read it the wrong way. If you haven't talked to a girl in 3 months, I don't think you need to be chomping at the bit with a present for her, but maybe that's just me.
Especially a very expensive present, as we find out.
Yes. And Christine arrives and is immediately shocked to see Spock in the transporter room, and is with Dr. Roger Corby, her fellowship director and now boyfriend. So so much for let's take some time, huh?
Yeah. Yes, she needed to be alone and get to know herself, which apparently took all of 5 minutes.
Yeah, and of course and this is actually joked upon later in the episode, he's quite good looking. He's an Irish actor, so you've got the accent, of course. You just want to punch him in the face, But Spock has procured her some sort of archaeological text that Corby's just drooling over. I believe it's Vulcan, and she tries to give the present back, and he doesn't accept it. And she's like, "Oh, come hang out with us." And Spock, rule number 1: you don't go hang out with your ex or your new boyfriend. Like, come on. But they're at the whatever the bar on the ship is. I don't think it has a name. And there's some romantic story, and she's got some honking jewelry, and Spock goes to the bartender, who appears as a Vulcan to Spock. This is very important. And you look up, and it's Reese Darby, conspicuously dressed like someone we've seen before. He pours Spock a drink, and Spock sort of wishes to himself that it was he and Christine who were together. And Spock wakes up the next morning in bed with Christine, and it's their wedding day. Excuse me, it's the day of the rehearsal dinner, so the day before the wedding day. They apparently have decided to get married on the Federation Centennial. And hijinks ensue. Dr. Corby remembers that this is not the way how things are supposed to be and confronts Spock after trying to break into his quarters. And finally, in the most rational, normal fashion, Spock just decks him, which was glorious, by the way. And in doing so, Spock realizes that this is not the way things are supposed to be. So the two of them try to deduce why events have changed and have come to sort of figure out strong emotions sort of clear the fog. They finally deduce that it's this bartender who's also the wedding planner and appearing as an Andorian, but still Reese Darby, is an all-powerful entity, and all-powerful with finger quotes, obviously, who is changing things and threatens to kill everyone and just cause mayhem if they don't comply with what he wants. And eventually they're at the wedding. Corby tries to protest. Spock, our all-powerful entity, turns him into a dog.
Another glorious moment.
Yes. And Spock uses one of Dr. Corby's romantic lines he used on Christine, and he gets her to break out of the fog. And the entity is revealed, and you see a Gasha basically as he reveals himself to the rest of the crew and snaps his fingers, and they're out of the fog, and a non-corporeal gaseous type life form comes and talks to this all-powerful entity and says, "Son, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be messing with humans. Sorry, he's a child." Voiced by John Delancey, the whole big shtick. It's Trelane from the original series. His parent shows up, his father. It's voiced by John Delancey, or forever known as Q. The insinuation here, and you may hear some odd descriptions from the writers, but the most plausible thing is Trelane is the son of Q, and following canon, this would be Q Jr., who showed up and we met in Voyager, is Trelane. So lots of branches out to various Star Trek shows. Lot to unpack there. And basically Trelane and his father leave, and they just have a party, and Spock and La'an go dance. And actually the most shocking thing of this episode, I never thought I'd hear Wham's "Wake Me Up Before You Go" in Star Trek, but we did. So yeah, there's your try to be brief synopsis.
No, so what do you, I would say, we can get started with like our overall feelings, for this episode. For me personally, I liked this episode a lot better than the premiere episode.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it was very focused. And, I also never thought that I was going to be saying this, either, but I almost feel that the strengths of Strange New World is its comedic episodes. Like it does a really, really good job with them. We had like Charades, which was an excellent episode. We had the name is escaping me, but the musical episode,
Subspace Rhapsody, and the Spock Amok. They seem to be centering their comedy episodes around Spock, which you wouldn't think would work, but it does.
It absolutely does work. Yeah, and it's nothing that I would have expected. And I think, like you said, it is kind of brilliant of, having these, of showcasing Spock in these ways. And so I was very pleased with this episode. Greatly enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed just, all of the little character interactions and the ways that it moved all these characters forward. So overall, I gave it definitely a thumbs up. Very much enjoyed it. What about you?
Oh yeah, this was definitely the stronger of the first two episodes, I thought. I mean, not only just the massive ties to so many other Trek shows. I mean, Roger Corby from the original series, who actually you're not supposed to really like him, but Killian O'Sullivan did a really nice job, and who knows, maybe we'll see him. I don't think we'll see a ton of him. We may see him again, maybe once or twice. Reese Darby is a delight in everything he's in. He just chews up all the scenery, and you can't help but just love him. He's great in Jumanji. He was great in this. You and I had actually speculated months ago about him being Q, and I remember having a conversation with you. It's like, I wonder if there'll be like not an after like credit scene or just an ending scene where you hear him talking to John Delancey. Never imagined they would make John Delancey his father, but love that. And that's probably the oldest fan theory in Star Trek, that Trelane was a Q. I mean, that goes back to probably the first episode of Next Generation. So kudos for them to finally confirming a incredibly long-standing fan theory. Sorry, there's so much to unpack in this one.
Oh, absolutely. And I was very, very happy that they confirmed that fan theory. And, him being a Q was just it was so perfect, and he just was having so much fun. You could tell playing this role. Like, I loved, like the way he would run out of a room, the way he'd spin around, or, the way he'd snap his fingers. It was just like you said, a delight to watch.
Mr. Corby, it's Doctor, whatever.
Yeah. And I love the scene when they're asking him, like, why are you doing this? And it's basically, that he sees Dr. Corby on the Q homeworld doing archaeology, and he's just too handsome, and he's just enjoying himself too much. And so he had to ruin his life. It was
Spock just goes, I concur. And I'm like, oh, this is glorious.
It was so great. And the other, like, I really enjoyed all the put downs of Dr. Corby. Was just so great. Like, I loved the scene when him and Spock are in the room and Corby says, perhaps the reason I wasn't affected was because of my great intellect. And then Spock just looks at him and says, are we really going to say that, with me here, that this is the reason, or paraphrased, but
your intellect is not the one that I would think would be unaffected or something. It was great.
Oh, I started laughing. It was such a great line. It was so good. And I also like, just kind of these comedic moments of how Spock is trying to break everybody out, like at his bachelor party, and it just doesn't work, And
then when Trelane's like, okay, Corbs. The fact that they let him improvise was just great.
It was so great. And I loved his, and we have to talk about talking about Trelane. The costumes in this episode were so good. Oh my
God, it's I mean, now Christine's wedding dress looked a bit like a snake wrapped around her, but
yeah,
it's like something you would see in the original series. Trelane's was on point. The dresses for the wedding, the female wedding guest, the dress uniforms look fantastic. Like the costume department actually might be the MVP of the first two episodes because they've just literally killed it and everything.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, like I loved, like, just the detail on Trelane's outfits was so good. It looked so amazing. And yeah, the dress uniforms are great. Pike looked great.
Scotty in his kilt.
Oh yes. I loved the details of that because it would have been so easy just to put him in a dress uniform, but I loved that they actually went that extra mile to give him, that kilt. That was great.
Absolutely. Could not agree more.
Now I think, an interesting thing, and this, we'll definitely have some opinions on this, but, how do we feel about this arc that they're giving Nurse Chapel? Because we saw a little bit of it, of it starting in the first episode of this season. And, we just are kind of seeing, this character arc of her with Dr. Corby, with her with Spock, and, and just, honestly, just for lack of a better term, she's just kind of a jerk. This episode.
Jerk's a nice word to use. That's not a
Yeah.
word I would have used, but that's a nicer word to use.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just, she's really just putting Spock through the ringer, really. And just like, what did you think about this? Were you expecting this kind of arc for her character this episode?
No, I knew she was going to have to meet Dr. Corby and fall for him because that's in the original series, and they're actually following the timeline like perfectly. But like, do you have to torture poor Spock? I mean, come on, the guy's tortured enough as it is. Like, we're getting to like O'Brien levels of torture here. Like, this is just not fair, like, I mean, come on.
It's true. Nurse Chapel is really giving off, Keiko vibes right now.
Oh God, you're right. Oh my God, you're right. But like, I mean, you see why she just pines after Spock in the original series, and he just doesn't want to have anything to do with her. Well, I mean, now we know why. Although it is interesting, I won't go down too much of a rabbit hole here. Depending on where you read in beta canon in the books, Spock, it's been accepted that Spock had married Saavik, but if you read the autobiography of Spock, it talks about when Picard is at his wedding. Actually, this may be in the autobiography of Picard, but I digress. He marries a human woman, and the only one that really seems to make any logical sense, barring it being a new character, do he and Chapel patch it up in like 80 years and then tie the knot? It's just, I don't know, just fun to speculate.
That is really interesting because I haven't read those books. And so that's a fascinating idea that, part of me kind of loves, a little bit. Like that's interesting.
But yeah, for sure. There's some, I don't know. I just like when I read it, she was the only one that came to mind. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's a nicer way to do it. Well, we're going to get Pring to come back in to the fold, so this is probably how. But yeah, she just, I don't know. It kind of irks me. I'm not going to lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what kind of makes it more painful too, for me at least, is because I really like Nurse Chapel as a character. Like, I feel like they've developed her so well over season 1 and 2, and we've gotten some great episodes with her, and her interacting with other characters, that to just kind of see her treat Spock this way is just it's really sad, and it just it hits you really hard. And it's a danger too. Anytime you're writing a show, obviously we knew that there had to be some type of relationship with Spock and Chapel because of the original series. But what kind of also makes it so much worse is that they just, as actors, they have great chemistry together. And
for sure.
And so, you naturally seeing them playing off of each other so well, it's almost like the example I use is like when you watch Aquaman and you're seeing Jason Momoa and Amber Heard, they have like no chemistry together at all. And so you really, don't care about their relationship that much. You don't care about, them together really in the sequel all that much. So it doesn't really matter, but then, Ethan Peck and Jess Bush, they go together so well. You're like, no, I want them together in this series.
Yeah, exactly. Could not agree more. Good example with Aquaman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely an example of bad chemistry. And so, yeah, it's very true. Do you think, in your opinion, do you think they're going to continue this kind of, pining, Spock pining after her a little bit throughout this season, or do you think it's going to be over after this episode?
There may be a bit of residual left over, but I'm thinking it won't be too long. I have an interesting theory to bounce off of you.
Oh, let's hear it.
So, the Strange New Worlds writers are crazy enough they would actually try this. We saw Spock and La'an dancing, and she danced with him at the end. Like, they've gotten a lot closer, and she seems to have embraced life and gotten over some of her struggles, which is great to see. They were very close, whether it was romantic or just a friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Could go either way.
Mhm.
But she's already got the thing for Kirk. If she
Yes.
had a thing for Kirk, and he's with Carol, but we know that's not going to last once David's born. If she ends up developing a thing for Spock, and then Kirk shows up in the picture, do we get a Kirk Spock Khan's descendant love triangle?
Oh,
Because does that not scream something they would do on Strange New Worlds?
that absolutely feels like something they would do. Like, because what I do love about the writers is that, nothing is too crazy for them. Like, they will go, hog wild on an idea, and almost always it's for the better. And I would be very interested to see a Kirk Spock Leon triangle. I think that could work really well.
And instead of like, if it doesn't work out for either of them, is that what brings them closer together and really helps push their friendship forward? Like former rivals end up becoming the closest of friends.
No, absolutely. I could easily see that happening because, I think that the one thing they haven't done fully, and I suspect they probably will do a lot more in season 4 and 5, is they haven't fully developed the Kirk Spock relationship yet. We're seeing hints of it for sure. We've seen them kind of growing closer in the episodes that Kirk has been in Strange New Worlds, but I feel like they definitely are probably going to be pulling them together closer near the end of the series. And that would be definitely a way to kind of explore that a little bit more. And also too, it would definitely be interesting because obviously Leon is not in the original series. She's not in any of the other Star Trek series. So, she either has to fade away, somewhere where we just don't hear from her again, or there's some kind of tragic end for her. And if that involves Spock and Kirk, that would be fascinating.
Oh, for sure. Like, I wondered about that too, unless it depends how much they lean into the temporal wars have changed the timeline, and maybe as a result of the timeline moving, she's a result of the new timeline, but I don't want to get too into those weeds because we'll never get out. But no, like she could. It's interesting. Like you said, she could have a tragic end. She could go. It's just gonna be weird, like especially like if you think about it from like the space seed perspective. Okay, like Khan, your great granddaughter had the hots for me, but like, I have a great grand. Like, how do you like? Does Kirk play that to the vest because he doesn't want to reveal he knows who he is, or like do that to La'an, or is she gone? Like, there's definitely there's a lot of story potential there for sure.
No, there is. Like, I've always said that her character is probably one of the ones that has the most potential, to explore, and because we know she has a soft, spot buried inside. We also know she has like a lot of darkness in her as well. That she's absolutely a character they could take in any direction, because honestly, they've even given some hints. I mean, they could turn her into a villain for the series if they wanted to, later on down the road, because we definitely got hints of her darker side in her solo song, in Subspace Rhapsody, where she hints a bit of more embracing the darker side of things. So, it'll be interesting to see, but I would be very down to see a love triangle between those three. I think that would be fascinating. And it would be a lot of fun to see Kirk and Spock competing for someone else's love. I think would be fascinating and fun.
Oh, for sure. There's your next comedic episode.
Absolutely. You could easily see that because, they are, what we have seen with the writers of Strange New Worlds, I think, is that they generally don't do things just for the sake of doing them. They're normally laying a foundation for their later stories with characters. And so I feel like, showing Leon and Spock getting so close this episode, and especially having them do a romantic dance for the first time. That was not, I mean, they could have, this is a comedic episode. They could have had them doing the jitterbug. They could have had them doing some comedic dance. They have them doing, was it a tango? It's like,
Yeah. No.
so they definitely, I feel like we're laying it on a little bit of like, okay, this could be some romantic feelings here, possibly.
And if my memory serves, which I believe I'm on the right track, Dr. Corby, when he disappears on that android planet, it should be probably by, we're in 2261. I believe that's when they say he disappeared. So is that loss going to drive Christine back to Spock? Would that break up the love triangle? Or what impact is that going to have, say, by the end of the season going into next?
That's really interesting because, I had forgotten about Corby's disappearance. So that's very interesting. So I wonder if that is going to factor that. I mean, I would assume that's going to factor into this season.
Yes, I'm thinking towards the end, I'm wondering if, like I said, we see him one more time and then, does he send her, "Oh, I'll talk to you soon," and then she doesn't hear from him again till the original series?
Yeah, because that would be, that would be like her. Yeah, that would be an interesting place to take her with the relationship. And like you said, that might drive her back towards Spock. Yeah, it's fascinating. There's a lot of potential of where they could take, the swampy romantic connections between these characters.
Just don't turn it into Star Trek Love Island. That's all I ask.
Exactly. That's my only thing is like, it's a fine line with these shows that you don't want to go full CW.
Yeah.
So it's like, you want to tease, you want to have these well-written character arcs, just keep it out of the soap opera territory of the CW. We don't want Elicity of Arrow.
We really don't.
But in all fairness, I do agree with you though that I think they absolutely have firmly laid the groundwork for Spock being over her, this episode. So I think he definitely is moving past her now. Now whether he'll get drawn back in again is the question. But yeah, we'll have to see. Do we know yet what episode Kirk is going to be returning this season, or have they kept that secret?
I think he's in at least 3. I read somewhere. I don't know. I don't expect to see him this week. This week is the Shuttle to Kenfori, and it's going to be the Klingon zombie episode, which, again, words I never thought I would hear myself say, but I'm here for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I cannot wait for that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's going to be like, just saying those words is a lot to unpack. No, but Kirk's going to have to come back. If not next week, within the 2 after that, I would think.
Yeah, so we're on episode 2 now. Next week will be episode 3. So then that leaves us 7 episodes. And if he's in 3, so it's either going to be the week after that, unless they're leaving him for like a larger arc near the end of like a 3-episode arc, which is possible. Because we don't exactly know. We don't know where the series is leading. I mean, we know it's leading in towards the original series, but we don't exactly know, how quickly they're moving that direction yet. So, lastly, I think, a very interesting, scene that happened in the show. Kind of 2 scenes. We can talk about the more dramatic one first. But as is typical Strange New World, fashion, they love, and I say this in the most positive way, I don't say this in a negative way, but they love their tonal whiplash. They love doing that.
Yes, they do.
And we got near the end of this episode, we got some tonal whiplash that, we have this kind of comedic dance scene with Leon and Spock and the rest of the crew. You mentioned the song earlier. That's just this kind of fun moment. And then we see, Ortegas leave, and go to the gym where she's kind of working out. She's working through some things, you can tell. And, we then get her look into the outer, porthole, I guess you could say, maybe, or window. I'm not exactly sure what they call it on the Enterprise. Her face completely darkens and changes, and you see, a ghostly form of a Gorn over her shoulder. And, and I think this opened up, a lot of interesting ideas here of like, for me that I was considering like, okay, are they going a PTSD route, where we're going to kind of go in this kind of dark psychological, storyline, or, are they going to go towards some type of physical, issue? Because, as you mentioned in our previous episode, they were in those digestion sacks, they were connected to the Gorn ship. So it's like, did something happen to her then that, that this is going to kind of impact in some way? I think there's a lot of questions there, but what are your thoughts, Jordan?
Oh, for sure. Like, I mean, if we can get a PTSD arc worthy of like Nogs on Deep Space Nine in season 7, those are some of the best episodes of Trek ever shown. Yeah, Ortegas has been underused, so it's about time we got something from her. I don't want to see anything too bad happen to her, like, because she's just so much fun. I'm curious to see if the brother, which we completely have left out, like Ortegas's brother shows up and has a thing for Uhura, and she's very interested. But yeah, I'm curious to see where they go there. It could go any number of ways. And then touching on your point a little bit further, Batel talks to Pike about she's got her choice of any, ship. And she talks about being on borrowed time. So is something bad coming for Batel? Like, okay, she survived the Gorn, but is she the Gorn? I'm sorry.
That is officially in Tachyon transmissions. When we refer to them, they are now going to be the Gorn.
Yeah, we need to play like a Gorn clip over that.
Yeah.
Literal death metal. But
Yeah.
no, is some tragic fate going to befall her? And, because, if you think about it, when Pike goes back to Talos 4, he ends up with Vina. So if Batel had still been around, I think she would have been by his side. So I'm starting to really lean towards him. I'm wondering if Batel is not going to make it through the end of the show. Either they're going to have to break up.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because especially, when we see that, as dedicated as Pike has been, to her recovery, and her, like you said, she's on borrowed time. She survived this horrific, infestation of her body, and now they're closer than ever. Like you said, why would she be with him when he needed her most, after the accident? And, so it kind of, like you said, there's either going to be some type of dramatic breakup, which honestly is possible because, we're only halfway through, Strange New Worlds. And, we know as we get closer to season 5, Pike's dark destiny is going to start weighing on him more, so is he going to purposefully push her away because he knows what's in store for him, or like you said, is something tragic, going to happen to her? I tend to lean probably that we're probably going to have something tragic because of that borrowed timeline, not timeline, borrowed timeline. So, that's not confusing at all.
No, I agree. It seems a breakup seems like a little bit of a cop out. And actually, it's funny, so they announced Strange New Worlds season 5 will have 6 episodes. So we'll have four seasons of 10, one of 6, so 46 episodes. So this week's episode will be episode number 23. So after this week, we are officially halfway through Strange New Worlds.
Man,
which is kind of hard to believe.
It is hard to believe, man.
And just touching, we won't go into this. It's probably more of a topic for another episode, but they had announced that basically season 5 Akiva Goldsman and Henry Alonzo Myers said they basically were going to tell the story they want to do through 4 seasons. So season 5 will be connecting Strange New Worlds to the original series, because and Where No Man Has Gone Before is not Kirk's like first day as captain of the Enterprise. Some time has passed. So we're going to get to see Kirk in command, and we're actually going to get to see what becomes of, say, Ortegas, number 1, La'an. You know, you do see Mbenga in the original series, but is it just a short-term assignment? He's being transported to a different planet. Like, we know McCoy will be chief medical officer. So, like, we're going to get some resolution to these characters, or at least see their next steps after they serve on the Enterprise, which I'm actually really looking forward to seeing. Like, it's not like when Voyager ended, like, they're in orbit of Earth, but you never get to see their reactions of returning to Earth,
That's fascinating, because I had seen parts of that interview, regarding the future of the show, and I was not aware that their air quotes completed story for Strange New Worlds was 4 seasons, and that season 5 was going to be the connective tissue between TOS and Strange New Worlds. That's fascinating. So I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I just literally, when it came out in last week, I was like, oh, well, this is not where I thought you were going. So I don't want the show to end on Pike's accident. Like, that's kind of, you talk about a downer. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Like, I would, I'm definitely open to his accident happening, in season 4, possibly, and then, maybe we get to see his happy ending, maybe, in season 5 would, I think, be much more positive, in my opinion, at least. I don't know if they're going to go that route, but I think that would be interesting.
But the other thing I'll say, and we have an episode recorded, I don't believe we've released it yet, about potential future Star Trek projects. But if we get to see more of Kirk in command, it just leans way more into the theory Byron and I have of, they've talked about, we've got the Enterprise sets. We've basically, by the time the show gets to season 5, they're going to have recast the rest of the main crew from TOS. Byron and I are not fans of a TOS reboot. It's just a bad idea in general. But jumping forward to after Star Trek The Motion Picture, you've got a 12-year gap from 2273 to 2285. There's no reason they couldn't basically do Star Trek Phase 2 like they had planned in the 70s. So you basically get a continuation, and you can hit, what if you can bring all these Strange New Worlds characters back? Maybe they find a cure for Pike. There's so much there, and I feel like they're leaning into that, especially now that you're going to get to see Paul Wesley as Captain Kirk in command of the Enterprise in season 5.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think, to all those listening, I think you're going to really enjoy that episode when we release it, of the potential projects. I definitely feel like, because one thing that I have noticed is, with the production companies and everything, that discussions for projects, plans for projects are always much further along than we as the viewer realize. There's always things being talked about before, because I'm currently working on a book right now, about, this one TV show, Jericho. And so I was interviewing the showrunner, and he's currently, working on another TV show right now, a different project. And it was interesting in our discussion, kind of, how he talked about how far along he was in that current show, that was, even before some of the announcements that had been made, of just kind of what had happened. And even, the TV show Jericho that we had talked about, how he had referenced how, oh yeah, that before the show was even, renewed to come back, there had already been all of this, maneuverings going on behind the scenes, before it was even announced in the trades. And so, exactly what you said, the sets are already there for Enterprise. They have everything, which would mean a potential phase 2 show would be much cheaper than Strange New Worlds was, because they already have everything built. And so it would, they already have all the actors, who have all basically said they're happy to be in Star Trek for as long as Star Trek will have them. And I could see potentially that this season 5, that is the connective tissue between TOS and Strange New Worlds, maybe this season 5 is going to be a bit of testing the waters, that maybe they, Paramount and them are interested in that phase 2 show. And they're like, hey, let's do kind of a test run, of a shortened season 5. We'll see how it does, see how people react to it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't considered. That's completely feasible.
And like you said too, something I hadn't even thought about, a cure for Captain Pike. There's nowhere in the lore that says he didn't get better. And so that would be very, very interesting that you could have, you could have Pike, in a phase 2 show in some type of supporting role. Maybe you see he's cured and he's back on a ranch, retired and happy, it would be great.
There is a comic. It's from the DC run in the early 90s. It's set between Final Frontier and Undiscovered Country. Kirk is off somewhere, so Spock's in command of the Enterprise, and they go back to Talos 4 because they found a cure for Pike. And Pike and Vina have had a son, and I think the son Joshua, I'm trying to remember how it ends. I don't know. Pike has died, and I don't know if he leaves to go see where his parents came from, and maybe enlist in Starfleet. I think both Pike and Vina have passed at that point, which we don't want. We need more Pike.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
But there's a ton there.
There's a ton. And what I do love about like the current Star Trek writers is that they delve into the lore, they delve into the beta canon. We've seen in Picard how we saw ships from Star Trek Online, that showed up. Like I love that they're willing to mine all of this material, for their shows. And, and I think one thing that, is an important, point to bring up too, is that, I would venture to say, more, and this might be controversial for some people, and I'm in no way bad mouthing Janeway, Cisco, Archer. Anyway, I love, all these captains, but I feel like Pike has really struck a chord with viewers in a way that those 3 captains didn't quite, in the sense that I feel like Pike as a character has a lot more, a lot more of a journey ahead of him if they wanted to involve him in other projects, if they wanted to, exactly what you said, hey, we're going to introduce a child, to Pike, and kind of go in a legacy route the way they did with Picard. I feel like there's a lot more potential because people have really, really grabbed a hold of Anson Mount's character.
That's a great point. It's almost like he's the Star Trek captain for, pardon the pun, the next generation. Kirk was the first generation, then it was Picard. Cisco didn't start out as a captain, was commander, eventually became a captain. Janeway was the first female captain, not the first to appear on Star Trek, but the first to headliner series. So it's a bit different for her. But there's I don't think you're ever going to get, it's Kirk or Picard. It's like those are your 2 tops. There will people who will argue for any of them, but in the general rule of thumb, your Kirk and Picard are for 1 and 2 for most people. I would have put Janeway probably a 3, but I could easily see having Pike move up to that, and depending on what they did with him, could he move up into the echelon of Kirk and Picard? It's definitely possible. Because even if you think about the current gen of Star Trek shows, Discovery killed Captain Giorgio in the first episode, and Burnham wasn't the captain again till season 4?
Season 4, I think.
End of season 3, permanently season 4. Picard, again, you're bringing back an old veteran, so it's not that he isn't beloved, but that's from another generation, whereas the new one, a new jumping on point with Pike here. Yeah, everything like you said, Anson Mount's too good to just sideline him. And, if they have a cure, why couldn't they have a phase 2 show and then run a concurrent show with maybe Admiral Pike's the one who gives them their missions. Maybe Pike comes back, is there for a year, and he gets another ship.
Mm-hmm. I would absolutely be down for that, because I definitely agree. Like, Anson Mount is just so good. He plays the character so well, and he's written so well. Like he really has that trifecta, of where you have a fantastic actor playing them, you have fantastic writers writing that character, and then you just have a great show that they're in. And so it's like he has all three of these together that are all working together to push his character. Like you said, by season 5, he might be, like you said, he might be up there in the upper echelon. And I think it's wild that if we would have been doing this podcast 10 years ago, and somebody would have told us, hey, there's going to be a new captain in 10 years who everyone is going to say they love so much that he might move up into the realm of Kirk and Picard, we would have said you're crazy,
Oh, absolutely.
And so it's like, it's wild that we're even talking about that as a possibility. I think is amazing. And I think that I have a feeling we will see more of Pike in the future, because obviously, we don't know exactly where Star Trek is going in the future, because there is some stuff up in the air with the merger and everything, but they're not going to abandon popular characters. If they see Pike is bringing in the viewers and this generation loves him, I don't think they're going to keep him, up on the shelf, forever. I think there's going to be some connectivity with that. So, but yeah, so as we finish up this this episode on Wedding Bell Blues, any final thoughts, Jordan, on this episode?
No, this was definitely the highlight of the 2 episodes that premiered this week. Thoroughly enjoyed this. Hope to see Reese Darby come back. Again, guy's great in everything. You don't want to overuse the Q, obviously, but like if he pops up, who knows? Maybe he'll pop up in Starfleet Academy or something. That's feasible, but liked him. If they can keep up this quality of this episode along with the rest, we're in for a fun ride the rest of the season.
Could not agree more. I'm very much looking forward to where we go. I agree. I hope we get some more Trelane. I think he was such a fun character, and like you said, you don't want to overuse that type of a Q character, but in small doses, it can just be such a good time. And I think definitely over the course of this season 4 and season 5, I would love to maybe see him pop up, a couple of more times, maybe torment Pike a little bit. I think might be kind of a fun Q Picard dynamic they could maybe introduce just a little bit, would be fun. Or, not even with Pike, but even with Spock and him could be really fun too. Would really, I think that's, a lot of potential. I think it was very smart, just after watching this episode, I think it was very smart them releasing it with Hegemony Part 2. So I'm very glad that they did that. But yeah, this was a very strong episode. As far as rankings go, out of 1 to 10, where would you place this one, Jordan?
Oh, the last one I gave a 7. I'm gonna say 8.5. It's very, very, very good. I don't know if I'm quite at 9. I think for me, because of all the connective tissue to the other Star Trek shows, it maybe appeals to me more than would say a more casual viewer, but I think they'll still really enjoy it.
Excellent. Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's tough because there was a lot of nostalgia at play, great writing and everything. So like, I think, actually, I honestly, I think I'm going to be the same as you and give it an 8.5 out of 10. I think I almost would put it at a 9. Very, very close. My only slight issue, if I have to put a little bit of negativity, out there as slight, is, I think at the back half of the episode, that it felt like they did kind of rush to a conclusion a little bit, near the end in the last like 15 minutes or so. It did feel like it kind of turned a little bit, into a speed run a bit. I think maybe the episode needed about maybe 10 more minutes to breathe. And I think I think if they would have had maybe another 10 minutes, it easily would have been a 9 to a 9.5 for me. So that's my only slight criticism of it. But like I said, it's slight because it was a great episode.
That's fair. That's fair.
So before we wrap up, Jordan, do you want to give us a slight tease, to what our episode 3 is going to be, that we're going to be reviewing next week?
So first of all, I will say I'm bummed I have not been able to find a next week on Strange New Worlds like I have been in the last 2 seasons. Maybe that's just operator error on my part. But the stills that were released that I saw, it's shuttled to Kenfori. Batel has an issue with in her recovery. So she, Pike, and Benga, from my understanding, take a shuttle to a colony, a Klingon colony. And I'm guessing this is sort of hush-hush covert. They don't want them to know their Starfleet. And something has happened. And, I mean, Klingons always like to pick fights. That's what we love them. So, but there seems to be some sort of outbreak, almost like they're zombie Klingons. And crazy things ensue. So as of tomorrow, we'll see how things go.
Man, I'm very excited. It sounds like a great premise for an episode. I like that they're continuing the storyline with Batel, and Klingons are always good. I love having more Klingons, and I'm very much like my sci-fi weakness is I love these kind of trapped. Trapped in an abandoned lab, virus outbreak. It's a great storyline for sci-fi. And so that excites me that we're going to be getting that type of storyline here in our next Trek episode.
Me too.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode on Wedding Bell Blues. I hope you enjoyed it. And, if you did, please consider giving us a like and subscribing so that you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes. As Jordan mentioned, we have a few unreleased episodes that are going to be dealing with, the future of Star Trek, potential projects. We are also following along with Strange New Worlds with each episode. So we're going to be dropping a new episode every week for the duration of the show. And so definitely, share it with any friend who likes Star Trek, and maybe share it with a friend who doesn't like Star Trek too, and maybe they'll grow to like it. Who knows? So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.